Hello, Eternal Life fans. I am with Gennady and Wendy Stolyarov. Uh, did I say that correctly, your last name correctly? Stolyarov?
Stolyarov.
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 There you go.
And so we're going to be discussing some recent developments in their lives, their projects, their passions. We'll see what's new. So hello, you guys. Thanks for joining me with this live chat.
Hello, Rowan. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
And on Thanksgiving, too. Happy Thanksgiving to you and to all Eternal Life fans.
Yes, to you too. Happy Thanksgiving.
Mm.
So I want to ask about this. You recently attended a Comic-Con convention, and you got to talk to William Shatner. I want to hear about this.
That's right. So this Comic-Con took place over the past weekend in Reno. It was a heavily attended event. About 10,000 people were there, I would say.
I'm not sure exactly how many, but it was heavily attended.
Yes.
It was the first Wizard World Comic Con in Reno, and they're going to be coming back next year, hopefully. But it's the first year that Reno's ever had a Comic Con, so that was very exciting.
So William Shatner was there. He was kind of the highlight of the entire event. I would say about 1,000 people were in attendance during his speech and Q&A. And actually, it surprised us because the auditorium was pretty full. But when the Q&A was announced, virtually nobody was at the microphones at first. So Wendy was urging me to go up quickly and take my place before other people would. So I did that, and I got to ask the second question. And I asked him a very simple, straightforward question. What are your thoughts about life extension through science and technology? And what I got in response to that was about 10 minutes of William Shatner discussing emerging technological breakthroughs, technologies that restore vision to the blind, restore hearing to the deaf, 3D printing of organs, including in the future 3D printing of hearts. He was talking about the singularity. He was talking about his encounters with Ray Kurzweil, and he himself was saying that he would like to take advantage of these technologies if he could, because he would not run out of things to do. He believes that he would use all the time he could get, essentially. So I got the impression that, one, he was a very good storyteller. Two, he really embraces life. He really loves life, and he has a lot of passions that he would like to keep pursuing and developing, even though he's over 80 right now.
Oh, you couldn't tell. He looked about 65, and he was incredibly cogent and well-spoken and mobile on stage. I mean, if I didn't know he was over 80, I would never have guessed. And the passion with which he spoke about life was really just moving and striking, and I can't imagine there being a better proponent of life extension or a better public figure to promote.
Let me just interject here for a second. I actually have a quote of his. So he says, this is a direct quote. He said, I want to live as long as I can. I don't want to die. Okay, that's what he said, right from his mouth.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I don't think he's in transhumanist circles exactly. I don't think he knows about Aubrey de Grey necessarily, though I don't want to presuppose. I mean, he does know Ray Kurzweil, and he's interviewed Ray Kurzweil. So that's an indicator that he knows at least a little bit about it. And he brought up the singularity, not Gennady. So I do think he's moderately well informed, and he has access to a massive group of people, Trekkies, Star Trek fans, who I think would, if they learned a little bit more about transhumanism, be quite willing to embrace it, because I think it's fairly in line with Roddenberry's original humanistic view, actually. Gene Roddenberry, the original creator of Star Trek. So I think that it was an excellent opportunity to publicize a little bit about the cause.
And I don't think you could find a better spokesperson for the cause of life extension than William Shatner, especially because if he mentions an idea like the technological singularity, all of the people who are there, who admire him, are going to pay attention to that.
Very true. Very true.
That was a lot of fun. We also saw Lando Calrissian, who we didn't get to ask about the singularity. So
Who's he?
The actor who played Lando Calrissian, Billy D. Williams, in the original Star Trek movies.
Oh, cool, cool.
So that was fun. It was a good comic convention. We don't really read comics per se, but we read a lot of science fiction and watch a lot of science fiction. So,
You guys familiar with this new movie coming out called Ex Machina?
no, I haven't heard of that one.
Oh, it looks so cool. The motto of the movie, the slogan, the catchphrase is, "There's nothing more human than the will to survive."
Ooh!
Nice.
It's all about survival, and it's got an artificial intelligence theme. There's going to be robots in it. Just so awesome.
Interesting. Well, I hope it takes a not too dystopian view of this, where at least some of the people who want to survive are not villains. Because it seems to me like whenever Hollywood takes on these themes, they like to spin it in such a way that the people who want to live forever end up losing their humanity in some way and becoming the villains. And I don't think that that needs to be the case.
Wendy and I recently saw the first 2 episodes of the ABC television series Forever, and at first it seemed promising because the protagonist is a person who can't die, and when he suffers an injury that for others would lead to death, he just gets resurrected in a magical fashion. But unfortunately, even though he has this wonderful ability that I would love to have, no matter what the mechanism behind it would be, he actually wants to find some sort of, quote, cure for it, and he devotes a lot of his time to that, and that's something that perplexes me.
Right.
I think.
Why would he seek out death so much? I mean, it makes it pretty clear, though, that in that situation he's effectively suicidal, and I don't think that that's a good way to live. Actually, it's an interesting way of bringing to the surface the notion that believing death is natural is inherently suicidal to a degree.
Absolutely. I actually saw the first episode of that as well, and I was completely disappointed with the way they were trying to twist it, and that making it seem like it's like this curse, right? That you have to live forever. I mean, it happens way too much.
I don't think they were even selling it very well, that it was a curse. I mean, it seemed to me like even the other characters, his adopted son, in the first episode doesn't seem to think it's too much of a curse.
Right.
So.
I mean, his adopted son is in his mid-60s now, and this character still looks biologically like someone in his 30s. And wouldn't that be something to aspire toward if you're senescing and someone you know isn't? I mean, no wonder the son is
a little jealous.
Although,
of course, since the main character has never been over approximately age 35, he doesn't know that it might suck to get old. So, I don't know. Maybe they play with it later, but we didn't stick with it because of that particular twist. It made me a little sad that was the twist they took. And then there was that Johnny Depp movie. Do you remember what that one was called, where Johnny Depp is...
Transcendence?
Yeah, Transcendence, where Johnny Depp becomes this artificial intelligence, and it ends up being evil that he's an artificial intelligence or something, and they shouldn't have played with nature and done this. Why does it always go that way?
I think in some senses it's a perverse attempt to flatter the audience.
Yes, that's exactly
to comfort
what it
them
is.
By saying, well, we're showing you all of these spectacular, fascinating things, but really your mundane lives are better than that because you don't have to deal with the alleged problems and the fallout and the unintended consequences of all of these wonderful attainments. So people, after they watch that movie, are comforted. They think, isn't it great to be exactly who I am in the time that I am? And that seems to be what sells. I think it's why dystopian science fiction sells as well. And it's unfortunate because it prevents people from aspiring towards something better. I think we need a more positive vision of the future, an understanding that the status quo is imperfect, it has problems, but we can create something better.
It's the difference between Star Trek The Next Generation and Battlestar Galactica. you know?
It's the old fox and the sour grapes, right? It's like they want to portray eternal life as sour grapes that you should be lucky not to have, you know?
Mhm. Exactly. Because we don't have it yet, so obviously it can't be that great. But you're exactly right, Rowan. Actually, it isn't directly targeted at transhumanism, but I think the most pro-transhumanism current science fiction franchise is the X-Men. And it's because these people are born with these special mutations that it seems to be okay, that it's not genetically engineered into them, but just inherent in who they are. That of course these are gifts and they can use them for the good of humanity. And anyone who wants to eliminate these more than humans is evil. So I think that that is kind of sneakily pro-transhumanism, though it's not transhumanism the way we're currently moving toward it. It's natural. So as long as you can portray it as natural, it's okay. So, oh, one thing that disappointed me, as long as we're still on the subject of movies and media, the new Jurassic Park movie that they're going to be making. Have you heard? Oh, you haven't heard it, that they're making a new Jurassic Park
I've heard of it.
Okay. Well, I was super excited because, you know, I'm a child of the 90s and I grew up with the original Jurassic Park. So I was like, yes, this is going to be great. So I watched the trailer, and they're evil, genetically modified dinosaurs.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, the big scare factor is that they took the dinosaurs and genetically modified them and cooked up something in a lab. So they're just playing on this whole modern fear of genetic modification, even though when we're talking about real genetic modification, we're talking about adding vitamin A to rice so that people in the third world aren't malnourished, you know? Mm-hmm. So I just find that very frustrating.
But it is, I mean, there's also, there's definitely risks involved if these things haven't been tested on, like, on human health. Like, even though I don't know that their genetically modified food is bad for me, I come at it from the standpoint of, well, better safe than sorry, right? If I don't know for sure that it's good for me, I probably should just avoid it.
Well, here's the thing, though. A few trillions of portions of genetically modified foods have been consumed already. Mm-hmm. It's not like explicit genetic modification of crops is anything new. In fact, Norman Borlaug started doing it in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm. And saved millions and millions of lives.
And really, a lot of the food we buy in supermarkets, unlike in the EU, in the US, there's no required labeling of genetically modified foods. So pretty much everybody has purchased and consumed genetically modified foods in the United States, and there's not one reportable health problem arising from that.
The way in which foods are being genetically modified is not going to be inherently dangerous. If you look at the way in which scientists are able to modify foods genetically, what they can do is do things like reduce the amount of water that a crop requires, or make it a little more hardy to insects, or make it less appealing to insects in some way. These are not massive changes. It's not like they're taking a scorpion and splicing it with an ear of corn. I can understand why people are scared, because technology is often scary when it's new. But I think it's largely the way that it's been portrayed that's scary, and not the science itself. And if you read into it a little bit, I think that's what you'll tend to find. It's not like birds with arms.
Well, you know? Have you heard about the genetically modified corn? I heard that they actually engineered a pesticide into the corn itself.
Well, it's not, again, this is the kind of scare tactic that I'm talking about. It's not a substance that's dangerous for humans. It's a subject that a substance, not a subject, sorry, that bugs don't like, but that is safe for humans, from what I understand. And what it means is that there's less dangerous pesticides sprayed onto the corn afterward when it's growing. So it allows you to use less actual dangerous pesticide later, which, as far as I can tell, is a good thing. The real problem with genetically modified whatever is that it's been mixed up with companies like Monsanto, which have seriously questionable corporate ethics. And then you get into questions of whether that kind of corporate ethics is good or bad. Obviously, you can object to the corporate ethics of companies like Monsanto without objecting to genetic modification, but people unify them. And I think that's confusing the issue too. And public objection to genetic modification is going to lead them to object to human genetic modification later, when it could save us from all kinds of diseases. I mean, say there's a genetic tweak you could make that will prevent ALS, or a genetic tweak you can make that will prevent Huntington's disease, you know? And people will already have been so turned off by genetically modified foods, just like they're scared of vaccines or scared of, what's another good example? Chemtrails or whatever else. And it's just so frustrating to me that we have these technologies, but because people are scared of science and don't actually learn about it, it won't be used to help humanity.
Yes, the fear has to be overcome, and again, it seems to me dystopian science fiction has done a great disservice. Even starting with Frankenstein, which was the earliest archetypical dystopian fiction, we still have the moniker Frankenfoods applied to genetically modified foods, and it's completely unjustified, I think, but it has stuck in the public imagination, unfortunately. So a big task of our movement will have to be cultural, to disassociate this fear from genetic modification, especially because foods are among the most innocuous subjects of genetic modification, compared to, say, altering the human genome, especially altering the genomes of people who are already in existence. That is going to require a large cultural shift to get the majority of people to accept.
Perhaps the most controversial of all, genetically modifying embryos while in utero. You know, designer babies. That's been a very controversial subject for years. You just have to look at something like Gattaca as an example in pop culture of how people are scared of the notion. And again, I completely understand that. And I don't think that Frankenstein is necessarily the earliest dystopia, Gennady. I think that may be a mischaracterization.
Well, it's the earliest well-known one that has continued to influence
I think you're missing Sir Thomas More.
Well, he called his a utopia.
But it is a dystopia, obviously.
He didn't think so.
Yes, he did. Sorry, I'm the English major.
So, I'm all for, my position on this is that I'm all for genetic modification of people, of anything. But I'd rather not be the guinea pig myself.
Oh, like, yeah, I can understand that. I don't want to be the first person to be genetically modified either.
Well, but even as far as like eating the food, like do you guys not even avoid genetic modified food at all? Like, do you not care about that?
I have absolutely no reason to do that. There's no reason to think that these things are unsafe. They've been tested thoroughly.
Yes, so, and we are not the first people to eat them. We are somewhere around the 3 or 4 billionth people to eat these foods.
Again, these have been around for quite a long time, and it's just a more precise method of improving plants compared to crossbreeding, which has been done for literally millennia.
But in order to test if they were really safe, wouldn't you need to do like a long-term study of like at least 50 years or something?
Well, food is easily broken apart and studied. You can see what's in it. And none of these substances are unfamiliar. I mean, if something like genetically modified corn was dangerous, you could take a piece of genetically modified corn and you could put it through a mass spectrometer and look at every single thing in it. There is not going to be anything in that mass spectrometer genetically modified corn that was not in previous corn. So, assuming previous corn is safe, genetically modified corn is also safe. You're eating it. You're not inserting its DNA into your DNA just because it's genetically modified.
And I think it's important to recognize that there's no guarantee that the food that humans evolved with, or even the food that humans cultivated through thousands of years of selective breeding using more primitive technologies, is in any way optimally adapted to the human organism. It is most likely the case that whatever the hunter-gatherers found in the wild, or whatever the early agricultural societies cultivated, while it provided some nutrition, it also had some other byproducts that were in some manner toxic or damaging to the organism. There's nothing that says, quote, nature
like
is
parasites.
optimal, yes, or that it delivers the substances we need for optimal health in the optimal proportions. So the great promise of genetic modification is that it can provide us a far more precise degree of control.
Oh, like Soylent. I mean, I don't understand why people would be afraid of genetic modification of something like a grape, which allows the grape to have a longer growing season or something, so that you can make more grape jelly or wine or whatever it is with said grape. But then they're totally fine with something like Soylent, which is pretty much entirely artificial, or protein powder, or whatever else. People are not consistent in what they are afraid of, because the fear is not rational. So
yeah.
I think to a large extent, it's like just the fear of the unknown, right? Like if they're not 100% certain that it's safe, they're going to tend to be cautious.
Conservative. And that's totally a normal human impulse. And like I said, I understand it. I just think that it doesn't hold up upon skeptical inspection with regard to genetic modification. That said, I'm not saying that there are no long-term, for example, monoculture concerns that might emerge from genetic modification, though I think genetic modification will actually allow us to have a more diverse population of plants than non-genetically modified plants. But that's totally separate from any health concerns, and I don't think that there are implied health concerns. Only possible implied monoculture or corporate practice concerns, which are a totally different subject.
Right. And I think the prerogative to grow genetically modified crops and to develop them should be spread far more widely than it is today.
Well, and I'd also like to encourage the industry, just like I would like to encourage 3D printing by purchasing 3D printed goods. I feel like maybe I can encourage scientific advancement in food by not avoiding genetically modified food products. I mean, I had a grape, and this was a genetically modified grape, a couple months ago, called a cotton candy grape, and it was the most delicious grape I have ever eaten, and it tasted just like cotton candy. It was amazing.
Whoa, I didn't even know they genetically modified grapes.
Yeah, they genetically modify everything. It's not a surprise, but this is the sort of thing they can do, and it's so cool. I mean, there's nothing dangerous about that grape. They just engineered it so that it has a different ratio of sugars and a particular flavor compound, and none of those sugars or flavor compound are inherently any more dangerous than anything else. They appear in other foodstuffs. But this was the coolest grape. Gennady ate them too, these cotton candy grapes.
Those large, very juicy-looking seedless grapes are most likely genetically modified.
Well, all of them are genetically modified, but yeah, the really big, juicy-looking ones, almost certainly. In fact, pretty much all your produce, at one point or another, has been genetically modified.
Are you sure you guys aren't getting confused with hybridization? I mean, because I know most food on the market is hybridized, but not everything is genetically modified yet.
Well, you might be surprised how much, because I think that people have too strict of guidelines over what they're calling genetic modification. It's very common to slightly modify a strain in a lab to make it more resistant to cold, for example, or more resistant to heat. These aren't a big deal. They're not scary. They're not what people get up in arms over. People start getting scared when you say, oh, look, there's this fragment of DNA in a fish or something, and that allows the fish to have whatever capability. So they take that fragment of DNA and transgenically put it into a corn plant or something. I don't see why that's scary. We were eating the fish anyway. It's not like it was dangerous when it was in the fish. Why would it be dangerous if you take that fragment and put it in a piece of corn? It's not going to make the corn taste like fish. It could be something like, this allows the fish to have an immunity to whatever. And now the corn has an immunity to whatever. I don't see why transgenic modification like that is scary. And, I mean, take naked mole rats. They are immune to cancer. if they were able to transgenically take a tiny piece of naked mole rat DNA that they find out makes the naked mole rat immune to cancer and put that in a human being so that the human being is then immune to cancer, I would not mind being 0.001% mole rat at that point. If that meant I could exchange it for an immunity to cancer.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Any new strategies you guys have to be healthy?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, during the months of September and October, I did more than 2.2 million steps logged using a Fitbit device that I recently obtained. And it was very interesting how one little device can change the incentives and the motivation that one has, because previously, in order to really measure how far one went, one had to go in a straight line or over a large geographical distance, at least relatively speaking. That way you could have a GPS measure how far you went. Or you had to go on an elliptical machine or a treadmill that would have a counter. But this device allows you to move anywhere, to step anywhere, even take 2 steps forward and 2 steps back, and it'll track your steps.
Well, pedometers have been doing this for a long time.
But this is a lot more convenient and a lot more
it's
accurate.
higher tech than a pedometer, in that it reports directly to your cell phone, and you have a live step count, and that's cool, and there's a kind of leaderboard with trackers, and it gives you a calorie estimate, which is also awesome. But you're making an untrue claim, which is that this technology has not existed, and pedometers have existed for a long time. It's just a little gyroscope thing that bounces up and down.
I've had some experience with pedometers, and let's say I was not impressed, but with this, I think there's a lot more consistency and a lot more of an ability to see, even as you're doing it, how much progress you've made.
And that's super cool.
The problem with a pedometer is it's attached to your belt or wherever you keep it, and then you can't look at it except maybe once every few hours once you've taken a break. But what if you're trying to, let's say, set a goal as you're doing steps, or you're trying to just check how far you've gone? I think it can be tremendously motivating, and it's one aspect of gamification that we're seeing emerge, because gamification allows one to experience this steady, immediately rewarding progress, which is why so many games are addictive, and more so than work in the external world is. It seems like a direct expenditure of effort is proportional to the rewards that you get, and the rewards you get are very obvious and visible and connected to the effort that you exert. So if you could bring that dynamic into the external world, into people's goals such as health, fitness, productivity, learning, then you could get people to be a lot more motivated in pursuing those goals as well.
That's kind of reminds me of, like, when you post something on Facebook, you get likes. That's like the gamification. It gives immediate incentive and rewards. You know?
Yes, absolutely. Or Fitocracy. I don't know if you're familiar with Fitocracy. It's a website that kind of perpetuates the gamification of fitness, which is super cool. If you check it out, there are achievements and quests, and the quests involve doing certain specific workouts, like do 20 squats and then do 60 biceps curls or whatever, and you get a quest accomplishment and an achievement badge, and you can tie it in with Runkeeper. There are lots of phone apps that do stuff like this now, like Run Zombies Run or something like that. I think, is it just called Zombies Run?
I think it's Zombies Run.
Zombies Run. And it's a GPS app on your phone that allows you to go for runs, and you hear, as you're running, basically, it's an interactive story. You're running from the zombies, and by running a certain distance or at a certain pace, you have to get away from the zombies, you have to go collect stuff for your base. It's a really neat gamification of running workouts, which is super cool. And there are a lot of these different endeavors now, and I think they're fantastic for getting people to be more healthy. We do have still a major obesity problem in this country, and getting people healthy, Thanksgiving's a great day to talk about this, is a huge step toward longer lifespans.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think it's important to realize most people have the ability to essentially control their health and longevity today up to about the age of 75. And that's really when the genetic component of longevity begins to kick in. But until then, through good, prudent health habits that aren't really a mystery to anyone, I think most sane, reasonable people will recognize that regular exercise, moderation, variety in one's diet, control of calorie intake, avoidance of harmful habits like smoking or large alcohol intake or recreational drugs would lengthen life expectancy and would prevent a whole host of bad diseases. And the advantage to that, especially for people who are younger, is that through these elementary good health habits, they could greatly increase their chances of surviving to see the major medical breakthroughs that could obviate some of the genetic problems that we currently face that currently set a kind of upper limit on our longevity.
Well said. Longevity, escape velocity, right?
Exactly.
I want to add to your list of things, methionine restriction. Look into this methionine restriction. There's a certain amino acid which really plays into the idea that what's natural isn't the best for us, because methionine is an amino acid in everywhere, but it's really high in meat and dairy products. And if you restrict this methionine, you end up increasing your lifespan a lot more, according to the studies. In fact, they found out that it's the benefits of calorie restriction, actually a lot of those benefits are actually from just restricting this amino acid. So if you're going to be restricting calories, you're automatically going to be restricting methionine. So look into that. That's a good one to do.
I'll have to investigate that.
Certainly, certainly. So among our other projects, I wanted to mention that in mid-November I completed the remastering of all 76 musical compositions that I've created to date. Several of them have very explicit transhumanist and even life extensionist themes. Man's struggle against death actually portrays the progressive defeat of each of the underlying types of damage involved in senescence. So
yeah, I love that one. I love that one, and I'm going to be using that in a video I'm making right now to promote Death is Wrong.
Wonderful.
That's
Thank
excellent.
You so much.
That's excellent, and I think it will help a lot. It will help inform people of the many facets of the life extension movement and what we seek to accomplish. So thank you very much.
I still think, Death is Wrong, it only hit the first wave of popularity. There's going to be more waves, tons of. I want that to go viral. I mean, it can happen again. A lot of kids can get this book that don't have it. So
I hope so too. That would be really good to see. Not because of any money that we derive from it, because I think so far we've made like what, $250 or something
like that
from total sales. It's not a high volume seller, and even if it were, our royalties are really quite small. But just perpetuating the ideas is so important, and at the very least it's there. It exists now as a resource, which is the most important thing.
And people can even, if they don't want the hard copy, they can download PDF versions for free from the Rational Argumentator.
So it's obviously not about the money. We'd rather give it away to as many people as possible.
In English, Russian, and Spanish, and hopefully we will have versions in other languages as well.
Wasn't there someone who offered to do a German translation?
Yes, someone has offered. No, we did get back to him and provide him with everything he needs. Another person is working on a French translation. There may even be a Polish translation. Of course, all of these individuals are volunteers, and so as a result, it really is dependent on their generosity. And what I have promised them is that I would prominently credit them on the cover pages, the title pages of the translated editions. And if anybody watching this is fluent in another language who would want to translate the book, please feel free to do that. Send me an email. Go to the Rational Argumentator and find Death is Wrong, find the English language PDF, because it's there, it's available. Even if you want to start translating it, feel free. Also, I wanted to point out we are still engaged in 2 projects to create small computer games based on Death is Wrong. And one of them would be a platformer. Another of them would be more of an interactive book where you have various prompts and choices, but you follow the overall arc of the book. And what we're finding is these games, even though they're fairly small, they would still be intensely visual, and they would require a lot of visual resources. What I've started looking to are images from the public domain or images licensed as Creative Commons, especially if the Creative Commons license allows derivative works or allows commercial use just in case, even though we would be offering those games for free. So one way that anybody can help us is by directing our attention to such freely available resources that are either in the public domain or licensed as Creative Commons for incorporation into these games. Because I know there are a lot of artists out there, and the problem is there's no good way of searching online specifically for public domain or specifically for Creative Commons licenses of a certain type.
There are some websites like opengameart.org that specialize in this sort of thing, but they are rather limited in quantity and type, unfortunately. And while I am an illustrator, I'm not an animator, and that's the big stumbling block we've come across with developing these sorts of games, because it really is a completely different field, animation. And it's quite complex. I was surprised. I was thinking, oh, it'll be easy, I can do that, but it's a big learning curve.
So the idea is, if we don't have to reinvent the wheel, if somebody has already come up with good images or good animations that convey the type of vision of the future, the type of vision of life extension or associated subjects, opportunities that people could pursue if they lived a very long time or indefinitely, we would like to know about this art, and this could be a starting point for something even greater, because right now I think even a lot of art pertaining to the future is a bit dystopian, but there are people who have a different vision, and it's just a question of knowing who they are, knowing where to find them, and especially if they want their work to be shared and incorporated into derivative works, then that impact that they have could be magnified even further, and we hope to help with that. So if anybody has knowledge of such resources, please send me an email to Gennady Stolyarov @gmail.com, or find my Google Plus page, find my Facebook page. Let me know, because we would really appreciate that.
Awesome. Wow, I hope that gets done. I hope there's more, a video game about Death is Wrong, and that would be so cool. So, Death is Wrong because life is right. You said it, You said it last interview. That's just been a theme of my life, is that death is wrong. Like, your book is the theme of my life, because if I die and cease to exist, I just feel like life is completely meaningless. Like, why am I here if I'm just gonna die and be annihilated into oblivion, right? What's the point?
Yes. Well, I've had similar thoughts, I have to say, and it's really sad what death does to people, because it doesn't even just imply that life stops at a certain point and you can't do anything. You don't even have a memory of what you have done, of what you have experienced. So everything from the past, every connection you had with the outside world is gone. Every thought you've ever had internally, every sensation, every emotion is gone. And while we're alive right now, we have the ability to think about the future and also to remember the past and to have this connection to the world that completely disappears with death. So yes, I would say death is the greatest problem, the greatest threat that we face, and fighting against it should be our foremost priority.
That said, I think that it's very important to avoid accusations of nihilism, which often come when one is not religious. Oh, you don't believe in God, so you must not believe in anything. And I find that to be a straw man and a bit of a painful accusation for people who do have rich and full and loving lives. And I think there's plenty of reasons to live, and it's important to focus on those sometimes when perpetuating the life extension movement, perpetuating the joy and passion of life rather than focusing on, oh, death is scary and death is wrong. Yes, death is scary and death is wrong, but even if I were to die in some fluke accident tomorrow, I would rather have spent my life richly with those I love, doing things that are meaningful to me. And with regard to the fight against death in particular, even if I personally were to die, or someone like Aubrey de Grey, as he's a bit older, unfortunately, he would still have added a great deal to the world and perhaps sped up the time at which people will no longer have to die, and thereby decreased the total number of deaths dramatically. So.
Well, actually, that's what Aubrey de Grey says he wants to do, at least in his public appearances. He says for him it's not so much about his own indefinite survival as it is about saving 100,000 lives for every day.
Exactly.
That he can hasten the arrival of engineered negligible senescence. And I agree that that's admirable. Of course, I want to be one of the people who are saved. And for me, I would say, yeah, there is a lot of effort that has gone into technological progress in general and life extension in particular by people whose individual chances of reaping the greatest benefits were fairly low or non-existent, especially people in prior centuries. So they laid the foundation, and I'm grateful that they did. I suppose my self-interested thinking is their efforts made it possible for me to have a fighting chance. And so that's a good thing. And anything that increases my own chances of achieving longevity escape velocity is something that I will encourage.
Absolutely. My Aubrey de Grey, as you said, like, yeah, his motives seem to be extremely altruistic, like as his primary motive. Whereas my primary motive is selfish. I mean, I selfishly want eternal life more than anything, and I am not afraid to admit that. Like, yeah, because like nihilism, right? Nihilism, the philosophy of nihilism seems to actually make sense if death was inevitable. Like, if death is inevitable, then nihilism, there is no meaning. Like, what's the point of existing if you only have a blip of existence surrounded by nothingness and nothingness? Like, what's the point?
Philosophically, I disagree with you on that one. I think that even if we are just a blip and death is inevitable, then life is still absolutely meaningful. It is precious, and the time you have, you can either spend in a gray fog of depression, complaining about how meaningless it is, or you can define and pursue your own meaning and make the most out of the time you have.
Well, also the idea is incrementally, any added unit of life is better than its absence.
Absolutely.
So let's say through our efforts at life extension, we can reach 200 or 300 years instead of 80 to 90 year lifespans. That would still be a desirable goal to aspire toward, and it would still give us a lot more time and a lot more life. Now, with indefinite life extension, nobody is guaranteed indestructibility. and that's unfortunate, I think. If I could get indestructibility, I would, but there would still be many perils that human beings would face even with indefinite biological life extension. So I would say, in order for ethics or morality to make sense, to come into play, one just needs to have the ability to incrementally extend life. And to a certain extent, that applies in all societies and in all levels of technological advancement. The fact is, if one doesn't eat for a few days, one is going to starve or at least have very severe health consequences. So for hunter-gatherers, the pursuit of food, water, shelter, safety from predators still made sense as an incremental form of life extension. For the majority of human history, the majority of people did not live to experience a lot of senescence. They died way before. So for them, radical life extension would have been, for instance, living in a sanitary environment, living in an environment free from war, free from predators. And for a person in antiquity who could thereby extend his lifespan from 20 to 30 years to maybe 70 or 80 years if he really found a peaceful place to settle down, no tyrants, no rampaging tribes, no vicious animals, no infectious disease, maybe live somewhere in a countryside with a vineyard, with clean air, philosophize, as some ancient thinkers did. That person might live to be 80, and that would be remarkable for that time period. So I would say there would be meaning in that person's life, and it's unfortunate that that person couldn't have lived longer. But nonetheless, again, because he could have lived until 80 instead of 30, he had 50 extra years of life to lay the foundations for that technological civilization that benefits us.
Yeah, it seems that the meaning of someone's life, if they don't live forever, the meaning is only for the people who are still alive, right? The dead person doesn't have any meaning for themselves,
right? For
the purpose. So it seems to be, if you're to say that your life has meaning even if you die, that's coming at it only from an altruistic perspective. That even though you're not going to have the meaning, other people are in the future are going to have the meaning, right?
I wouldn't call it altruistic as much as I would call it non-solipsistic. I mean, the rest of the world does continue to exist even after you cease existing. So
I would
either
say,
you leave it a better place or a worse place, but it does continue to exist without you, as sad as that is.
The meaning, in some ways you're both right. The meaning of one's life to oneself is only a relevant question if one is still alive.
Right.
It's like a rock doesn't have meaning to its existence, except insofar as somebody else uses that rock instrumentally to achieve some purpose. So those people who are still alive could think about the meaning of their lives no matter how long they have left, and then I think the ethical pursuit would be to try to make those lives longer for themselves and for others. Once they're dead, the meaning disappears for them. Others might still draw upon their legacy, their achievements, their contributions to the world.
I'm curious, do you guys ever get accused of your transhumanism as being a selfish thing? You know, sometimes probably people think that I'm just selfish. Well, I am selfish, self-interested, and wanting to live forever. But there's also an altruistic side to it. Okay, it's not just selfishness, because I can't help anyone if I'm dead. You know, like
right.
if I can live forever, I can be the most effective altruist there is. I can help. I can make the world paradise. You know, like if I have an eternity of time, but if I'm dead, I can't help anyone.
Absolutely. Yes. Also, if you get life extension, other people will too. The probability of you being the only person who suddenly becomes immortal is exceedingly, vanishingly small. So if it becomes accessible to us, that means it will be accessible to other people as well. And pursuing that goal is not pursuing it only for ourselves, but pursuing the existence of the technology for all of humanity.
Mhm.
So,
And that accusation you mentioned is very common, and
yes.
I think it arises from a misconception, very basic misconception of what it would take to achieve indefinite life extension. And it would take major medical progress for our entire civilization. I don't see how, once that progress is achieved, it could be kept, not just from the majority of people, but from all people. That is to say, if it's anything that could be mass produced, and once these treatments are discovered, you can bet that huge efforts at mass producing them will be launched, because all of a sudden billionaires, who most of whom have balked at investing in this area now, as they might not see a clear profit potential or a clear potential for success, once there is a viable proof of concept, they're going to think, this is a huge profit opportunity. There is a huge market out there, because no matter what philosophical qualms people might express, once the opportunity is actually in reach, visibly in reach, a lot of people are going to jump on the bandwagon of life extension.
People reject it for the sour grapes reason you mentioned earlier, Rowan, because they don't believe that it actually exists yet, because they haven't seen a proof of concept, and I think that's fair. I mean, we don't have immortal rats in a lab yet, but as soon as we have something like that, I think you're going to see a lot of perspectives shift, and I think you're going to see a lot of people realizing that the grapes are within reach.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be even sweeter than cotton candy GMO grapes.
Right. And once people realize that the grapes are within reach, then they'll have really something to fear, because right now they don't even fear missing the grapes, because they don't fear missing out. But once they realize the grapes are going to reach, then they're going to think, oh crap, if I don't get those grapes, other people are going to be living forever and I'm going to be missing out. I'm going to have nothing.
Right.
Yes, and it's interesting to think, actually, there are so many ambitious people in the world, and this is where I'm very much aligned with thinkers like Adam Smith and Ayn Rand, who believe that in following one's true self-interest, one's long-term enlightened self-interest, one is actually helping others as effectively as possible, more so than if one just completely decided to abandon oneself and focus exclusively on helping others. But there are so many ambitious people in the world, people who have amassed vast fortunes or achievements in other areas. And yet, if you think about it, in today's world, especially in the so-called developed world, how much difference does that really bring to their lives? Sure, they could afford bigger houses, better cars, maybe private jets, but most often they're reliant on the same infrastructure that we rely on. Very often, for instance, the same sanitation systems, the same rickety, windy roads that they travel on, the same traffic hazards that most of us encounter, the same hazards of technological failure, like if a computer network fails or if an airplane system fails. And if one of the billionaires gets a currently incurable form of cancer, they will still succumb to it even if they throw all of their billions of dollars at it. So I think for people who are ambitious but try to realize their ambitions without changing the whole underlying system they live in, without trying to push forward the boundaries of technological progress and the boundaries of what is possible, they're going to be disappointed in some way. Historically, a lot of people have referred to death as the great equalizer because it came to kings and peasants and tycoons and middle-class people alike. But I think a lot of people wouldn't be satisfied with that and shouldn't be satisfied with that. So in some ways, the most ambitious among us, the people who want to differentiate themselves from the rest, should be the ones pushing really hard for life extension right now, and other forms of technological progress too, because that's really the way to unequalize things for them, but also to lift up the rest of humanity by giving people these opportunities that nobody has had in the past.
Absolutely. I really agree with what you were saying, that the most selfish thing you can do is actually, like, when you're truly being selfish, you're actually going to help other people in that process. Because, like, if you're really being selfish, think about it. you wouldn't want to do anything bad to hurt other people, because that could come back to you and it hurts you. You'd want to even help other people, because then you would have a higher self-respect for yourself, and that's going to reflect in your actions. You're going to be more loving towards yourself if you love yourself because you've done good things for other people, right? Being selfish is actually helping other people too.
There's no reason you can't do both. There's no reason you can't engage in philanthropy and also pursue your own interests. And as you yourself have demonstrated, Rowan, life extension advocacy does not have to be expensive. And neither does philanthropy. If one wants to volunteer working at a soup kitchen or something like that, or whatever your favorite local charity is, that is also not something that costs money. So doing good in the world doesn't require a large nest egg.
Yes, and I will also say a lot of good in terms of life extension activism can be achieved by harvesting the metaphorical low-hanging fruit. There are initiatives that could be advanced or deployed, even at no cost, some of them for a couple hundred or a couple $1,000, like my successful fundraiser to distribute over 1,000 copies of Death is Wrong. But there are just so many opportunities for ordinary people of ordinary financial means to get involved. One great idea, for instance, if one doesn't mind a slightly higher electric bill, is to devote one's idle computer time to protein folding calculations. There is a team on Folding at Home called the Longevity Meme, which has been operating for many years, I think close to a decade now, and is one of the top 200 teams at Folding at Home. But I've been asked to help out with getting more people to participate, and this is one great way to participate without even expressly donating to anything, just accepting a slightly higher electrical bill for running these genuinely scientific calculations that directly benefit the work of researchers in major universities and labs.
Very awesome. Let's see. I think this is probably a good time to end the interview, just so it doesn't get too long, and I hope we can do this again.
Absolutely.
Anytime, Rowan.
Absolutely. We greatly enjoyed it, and I think it was wonderful to delve into all sorts of both philosophical and practical applications of life extension.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
You do.
It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.
I'll see you guys later. Peace. Eternal life.
Indeed.
Indeed.
May you never die.
Death is wrong.
Death is wrong.
Death is wrong because life is right. That's the motto. Bye.